Each year, there is no doubt that the Stanley Cup playoffs are one of the more popular times of the year, and once the regular season is over, it's not rare that some of the best hockey of the year is played. But every once in a while, a team comes along that is not like many others, sometimes sets records, and then sometimes they go on to win the Stanley Cup, and sometimes they don't. Today, we are going to talk about 5 of the best teams to ever make the Stanley Cup playoffs and what set them apart from everyone else. 2022 to 2023 Boston Bruins. While the verdict is still pending for the Boston Bruins as far as what will happen to them in the playoffs, there is no doubt you can't discount them as one of the best teams in history. As of the writing of this video, the Bruins went up 3-1 on the Florida Panthers, but Florida then came roaring back the next 2 games to tie the series at 3 heading into Boston. After all, they did eclipse the 60-win mark during the regular season and broke the all-time points record with 135 points, finishing the season with a record of December 5th, 65. A big reason for that was due to the play of Boston's new goalie, Linus Ullmark, who finished as the only goalie during the regular season with a goals against average of under 2 at 1.89, led the league in save percentage at a 93.8 save rate clip. It also didn't hurt that Ullmark's backup Jeremy Swayman finished 4th in the league with a goals against average of 2.27. The only 2 being in between them were Minnesota's Philip Gustafsson, who had a 2.1 goals against average, while Carolina's Antti Ranta finished the season with a GAA of 2.23. Boston's scoring lines weren't too shabby either, as David Pastrnak managed to accomplish a 61-goal season, second in the league to Edmonton's Connor McDavid, who had 64 goals. So what made the Bruins so special this year? They have a mix of more seasoned veterans and new blood that has become very deep, led by Captain Patrice Bergeron. When your captain is Patrice Bergeron, people get acclimated real quick to what the culture is and why it's special to be here, more importantly, Montgomery told Yahoo Sports in an article published March 9th. Under Patrice Bergeron, there's a bunch of assistant captains that are great as well, that understand that Spoke B matters more than anything, and that's what we're driving towards. For number 2, we have the 1984 to 1985 Edmonton Oilers. What made the 1984 to 1985 Edmonton Oilers for good? They were offensive juggernauts as Wayne Gretzky. Gretzky had 73 goals and 135 assists for 208 points, while Curry popped in 71 goals while also producing 64 assists for 135 points. If that wasn't enough, the Oilers' depth wasn't so bad either, as they had players you may have heard of if you have followed hockey for a while, with players such as Mark Messier, Paul Coffey, Glenn Anderson, Grant Fuhr, and Andy Moog. In total, this team had 540 goal scorers. The others were Mike Krushelnyski, 43, Glenn Anderson, 42, and Paul Coffey, 37. While some of these players eventually went on to play for other teams, they all got to play alongside the Great One during this season, and it's hard not to call them one of the greatest teams that ever played. During the playoffs, the Oilers were just as dominant in the postseason as they were during the regular season, as they went 15-3, which included sweeps of the Los Angeles Kings and Winnipeg Jets in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, and their first loss wasn't until Game 3 of the Western Conference Finals, when they lost to the Chicago Blackhawks 5-2 after trailing 3-1 in the first 40 minutes. The Oilers also lost Game 4 8-6, but this one was much more eventful due to a wild first period, which ended with Chicago leading 5-3 after the first period, and it wasn't just high scoring. It was also extremely physical, as 60 minutes of penalties were given out in the first period alone, and 110 penalty minutes for the game. Despite the contest for what felt like one from the Wild West, it still didn't stop Edmonton from outsourcing Chicago 18-7 in the next 2 games by scores of 10, 5, and 8, 2 which propelled them into the Stanley Cup, one which they beat the Philadelphia Flyers in 5 games, 1976 to 1977 Montreal Canadiens. So who is the greatest Stanley Cup team that ever played? Some hockey historians would consider this team to be it. At the start of the season, it's highly unlikely they were at the start of a dynasty. After having won the Stanley Cup in 1973, and also the year before, the Canadiens also won it all in 1976, 1978, and 1979. So what made the Canadiens of the 1970s so great? In goal, you had one of the greatest goalies of all time in Ken Dryden, and on offense, you had two 50-50 goal scorers, something which is considered unreal even by today's standards in Steve Shutt, 60 goals, and Guy Lafleur, 56 goals, and if you're wondering, yes, the stats turn to wins. During the regular season, Montreal recorded 132 points, which at the time was a record for most points in a season, which was a record of August 12th, 60, and then went 12. 2 in the playoffs, both losses being to the New York Islanders in the second round of the playoffs. In the first round, the Canadiens held the St. Louis Blues to 4 goals for the entire series, with only one shutout when they beat them 3-0 in Game 2. In the other 3 games, they beat them by a combined score of 16, 4 with wins of 7, 2, 5, 1, and 4, 1. In the second round, the New York Islanders put up more of a fight as 4 of the games were decided by 1 or 2 goals, including a 4-3 overtime win by the Islanders in Game 5 by the score of 4-3. In the Stanley Cup, Montreal swept the rival Bruins, but really had to fight for the sweep in Game 4 as it went to overtime for a 2-1 win on a goal by the Islanders' Billy Harris. 1995 to 1996, Detroit Red Wings. Who is the greatest team not to win the Stanley Cup? There is no doubt this team could be it, as they were dominant, as during the regular season they flirted with the single-season points record with 131, finishing the regular season at 62-13-7. However, they didn't quite have as much success in the playoffs as the other 2 teams listed on here, as it took them 6 games to get past the Winnipeg Jets in the first round, and a full 7 to beat the St. Louis Blues in the second round before bowing out to the Colorado Avalanche in 6 games in the 1996 Western Conference Finals in 6 games. During the regular season, there were several unusual trends during the season, including back-to-back ties, one with 5 goals and the other at 3 against the Winnipeg Jets and Calgary Flames on October 15th and 17, and happened again April 3rd and 5 against the Anaheim Ducks and Los Angeles Kings on April 3rd and 5 with both games ending in ties at 2. After the second set of back-to-back ties, Detroit put the foot on the gas, outsourcing opponents 20-7, which included wins over the rival Chicago Blackhawks 4-1 and 5-3, respectively, while also beating the Winnipeg Jets and Dallas Stars 5-2 and 5-1. 1991 to 1992 Pittsburgh Penguins. This Penguins team set another record of 11 straight playoff games to defend their Stanley Cup, and when you saw their lineup, you could see why. Not only did they have their prime star in Mario Lemieux, the Penguins also provided Lemieux with plenty of depth, as he got to play alongside defensemen Paul Coffey, Ron Francis, and Jaromir Jagr. While the Penguins were deep, that doesn't mean they weren't met with challenges throughout the playoffs, as they fell behind 3-1 against the Washington Capitals before winning 3 straight, and then starting in the next series when the 11-game winning streak started. They fell behind 2-1 against the Rangers, but then they won 3 straight, swept the Bruins, and then finished the season with a sweep of the Chicago Blackhawks, which also was a fight as the Penguins fell behind in Game 1-4. Won by the halfway point, but made comeback goals with goals from Rick Tocchet, Mario Lemieux, and Jagr.